Welcome to episode 14 of the Animorphs Read-Along broadcast. Today we are talking about book 13, The Change. This is a really exciting book that has massive implications for the Animorphs going forward. This book does a couple really important things. It gives Tobias the ability to morph again. It complicates the Animorphs' view of the Hork-Bajir as sort of these violent killing machines. It gives us the first free non-Yeerk Hork-Bajir in the entire universe. It gives us our second big appearance by the Ellimist, and I think it really answers some important character questions for Tobias as far as what he wants and who he is. So Tobias spends a lot of his free time doing reconnaissance kind of stuff, and in this book at the beginning he's like, hey Rachel, I want to show you some Yeerk pool entrances that I've mapped out, whatever, but he suddenly finds himself in an area that he is not trying to be in, was not planning on going to, happened to see the two Hork-Bajir running away from the Yeerk compound, and over the course of the book they realize that these are not Yeerk-infested Hork-Bajir, they are free. We learn quite a bit about the Hork-Bajir as a race in this book. Hork-Bajir may be fierce in battle, but they're actually kind of dumb. Big hearts, little brains. Axe meets Jerahami for the first time. There's sort of these angsty statements thrown back and forth because Jerahami's like, you Andalites, you failed to save us. And Axe is like, we tried. And so we've gotten little hints and pieces so far about the war for the Hork-Bajir, and apparently it was pretty grim and it's considered a big failure, but we don't know the details yet, and obviously we'll find out a lot of those in the Hork-Bajir Chronicles, so get excited for that. So when Tobias just happens to be there as the Hork-Bajir are escaping, he kind of suspects that something's not right, this is weird, and about halfway through the book he realizes that this is the Ellimist messing with him. When we first met the Ellimist in book 7, he was presented as almost like a conservationist. He wants to preserve species, and he also wants to give a little help on the good side of this battle with the Yeerks. So the Ellimist has helped free these Hork-Bajir and has sort of granted Tobias with this mission of saving them. And Tobias is like, you know what, if you're gonna screw with me, I want something in return. The Ellimist says, what do you want, Tobias? And he goes, you know what I want, almost choking on the words, you know. And the Ellimist says, yes, but do you know what you want, Tobias? When the Ellimist first appears to Tobias, he's appearing in the form of a bird. And the Ellimist says, I chose a shape that I knew you would identify with. And Tobias is like, you know I'm human. Sort of the big question for this book is, what does Tobias want? Does he really want to be human again? The Ellimist ends up returning his ability to morph, but keeping him as a hawk. Obviously, the Ellimist is implying that Tobias does not really want to be human again, that he's happier as a hawk. I think we can see some ways in which this might ring true. Tobias's life as a human was no walk in the park, and he, over the past few months, has really become a bird. I mean, for better or for worse, being a hawk is now a huge part of his identity. Is Tobias human? Does Tobias want to be human? Is Tobias a hawk? These are constant identity issues that Tobias is working through. The Ellimist gives Tobias back the ability to morph into his human self. He sends him back in time to the night before the construction site and lets Tobias the bird acquire Tobias the human. And then at the end of this chapter, the Ellimist says, have I kept my promise? And Tobias says yes. And he goes, and are you happy, Tobias? And we don't get an answer to that question. Obviously, I think it's a complicated question with a complicated answer. I think for now, yes, Tobias, the best situation for him is to be a bird with the ability to morph into himself, but not to live as a human. That's a weird thing, but I think, for Tobias it works. Thanks to the Ellimist, who has basically been implanting this picture of a valley in Tobias's head. Tobias knows the perfect place to take these two Hork-Bajir. And it's sort of this hidden valley in the mountains that it's almost impossible to find unless you already know where it is. And the Hork-Bajir talk about how they're going to have kids, and so we can sort of see this hopeful picture of the Hork-Bajir race starting over. Need to talk about the fact that Tobias is always brown-headed on the cover. I mean, not always, but a lot. Even though they've explicitly stated 1,000 times that Tobias has blonde hair. So the Ellimist is back in this book, and I love the Ellimist. Like, I know that the Animorphs themselves have very mixed feelings about him. They get frustrated and they feel like they're tools in his game, but I am always, like, so stoked when the Ellimist appears. I think he's so cool and interesting and, like, thought-provoking. He's obviously on their side. The fact that now there's a Hork-Bajir colony and now Tobias can morph, I mean, those are awesome things going forward, because I do think, just from, like, a writing standpoint and a plot standpoint, the fact that Tobias could not morph had started to be a little bit limiting sometimes in certain stories. So he either has to be left out, or they have to be like, and Tobias was having a really rough time. Not only from a character standpoint, where this is really awesome because Tobias has felt like so on the sidelines and he's felt useless and like a not full-fledged member of the team. From that standpoint, this is a great move, but also just from a practical standpoint, as far as like the writing goes and the storytelling, there are going to be times where Tobias just needs to be able to morph. And now he can. So yay! So those are all my thoughts about Animorphs number 13, The Change. The next book is the Andalite Chronicles, which is long, and I initially thought about breaking it up into 2 videos, but I'm just going to do it in one. If you want to keep up with this read-along, subscribe to this channel or follow me on Twitter. The Andalite Chronicles is Elfangor's story, sort of a prologue to the series, and it's just so good. I will see you to talk about its greatness on Thursday.